Hey everyone, so this video is a slightly re-edited version of an old video that I did a few years ago. It's a response video to a woman from Australia who was in the sex trade describing her experience. Yeah, a lot of people found value in this video a few years back, so I figured that I should re-upload it. Yeah, but I'm doing a little bit of editing because there were some things that I would add today or maybe phrase differently today. I don't want to do a long preamble. I just want to say the point of this video is not to attack the woman who appears in it. I think it takes a lot of guts to speak publicly about the fact that you were in the sex trade, no matter where you fall, whether you view yourself as having been exploited, or if you view yourself as a sex worker, or maybe somewhere in between. No matter, that is a tough thing to do. You're going to encounter a lot of stigma, may even have to compromise your safety, so that goes for any woman who speaks up. So the point is, it's not about the individual in the video here so much, it's more about how do we react to women's testimony. It's more about the interviewer and the audience. When we hear women describe their experience in the sex trade, why do we react a certain way? Because sort of the thought experiment that I want to do is just imagine the payment aspect was removed. Just imagine a good friend of yours described her sex life this way. Let's take the payment out of the picture for a second, because I feel like that clouds a lot of people's perspectives. It shouldn't matter whether there's payment or not in terms of, what's consent, what's violence, etc. As you'll find, the things that she will describe, a lot of these technically be considered assault. But because we're looking at it through the sex work lens, our perspective is distorted and suddenly it's a funny, kinky story. Okay, but let's get into it. You guys can see for yourselves. This is the preface from the original video. Let me point out again that all the things that Kate is about to describe to us happened to her while she was a heroin addict. So we're talking about men buying sexual access to women who may well have shown signs of addiction. And I know for a fact that this happens because many testimonies from women in the trade speak of this. And this matches up with what punters write on their forums, where they'll freely admit to buying women who are evidently high. Not all of them, but enough for it to be a common occurrence.
So if somebody was doing something that you weren't comfortable with, how would you stop them?
Well, I'd probably say things like, oh, sweetheart, why don't we do something else, or gently move their hand away, or because they try all sorts of things. And I've got to tell you, one of the things about men which is most horrible is they don't cut their nails.
Oh, no.
And we used to say, what's nicer, this or this?
Oh, so you do it
and
to
if
them
necessary, I'd do that on his penis, the end of his penis, just to, underline the point. But if they got really out of control and they wouldn't do anything, I'd bite them. Just bite them on whichever part of their anatomy which happened to be the most annoying or right in front of my face.
Call me a prude, but if your sex partner won't accept you saying, no, I don't want this is making me uncomfortable or hurting me, then there's something really fucked up going on, and you need to get away from that person as soon as possible. If they don't take you at your word when you're telling them that they're hurting you, they shouldn't get any access to you. These are your boundaries, and anyone who doesn't respect them doesn't deserve to touch you. Unless in the sex industry somehow there are different rules for sex, and enthusiastic consent isn't required. If any of you listeners want to make that case, I'd like to hear you argue it. I don't see why that would make sense, as I see it opening doors to severe abuse, but I won't delete your comment if you don't share my views.
So if they tried to kiss me,
Yeah.
and I'd ask them not to kiss, and they stuck their goozy old tongue in my mouth, I just bite as hard as possible. It's amazingly difficult to bite someone else's tongue.
Who of you listeners has ever been attracted to someone, but not wanted to kiss them? Who here has been attracted to a person's body, but not their mouth? I'm gonna hazard the guess that that's exactly 0 of you. But it's very common amongst prostitute women to refuse to kiss men, because in a way, a kiss can be more personal and intimate than penetration. And it gives the prostitute woman the feeling that she has a little control. She's got that one boundary she keeps up. But unfortunately, the control is largely an illusion. Because like Kate is telling us, John still violates this boundary all the time.
Yeah, it would be a
hard.
bit slimy and...
It was muscle. It kind of bounces back.
What about this is funny? What's there to laugh about? If my friend came to me telling me that she can't tell her sex partners to stop doing things to her that she doesn't want, I'd be immensely concerned. If she told me the only way she could get her boundaries vaguely respected was through distracting and biting her partners, I'd have a lot of emotional reactions. Like fucking fury at those assholes who disrespected my friend, and despair at what she was put through. But none of these responses would involve any laughing.
Tongues, I bit nipples, I bit penises, like whatever it
So
took.
if you bite...
They didn't seem to notice enough. I think they thought it was kinky and I was getting really into it. I'm like, no, this is a biting situation.
Unbelievable. Were there many times you had to do that with your clients?
Oh, they were. And look, I work Friday and Saturday nights, which are like the jungle times.
Right.
So as the night goes on, men come in more drunk, more out of control, have had more coke. They're with their mates, more big groups of guys all showing off to each other. And they've got so much more to prove. And really one of the nicest things sometimes, but usually one of the hardest gigs, was when you had a group of guys who wanted to go into a room together. Men
And you would do
like
that.
to do this. They like to have sex with, in front of each other. It's sociable.
Girls, women, ladies, who of you finds the idea appealing of being alone in a room with a group of men late at night, drunks among them, some who are high? Even removing the sexual context, this is fucking scary. This is a nightmare situation for most women. For women in prostitution, this is Saturday night. Does it sound like a fun job?
I had no
That's
idea.
really strange.
I don't think women think the best thing I'd like to do with my Friday night is go off and have sex in front of all my girlfriends with other people. But anyway, so men do this, and they
How many would be in a room?
like 3 or 4 in a room. We had rooms that were very big with big, super-sized, king-sized beds, super wide beds that you could fit
Awesome. I
3
want one of
couples
them.
on.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's a bit weird because you're with one client that is your client, and then someone else's little hand comes, But it was kind of nice, but because men are nervous, they show off in front of each other then.
Yeah,
so they're a
okay.
bit more hard to control, and you have to be more polite in correcting them because otherwise they'll lose face and get angry.
I think Kate is spot on when she says that this is men trying to prove something to each other. Trying to prove their manliness by using women in front of each other. Women as props for men to demonstrate their power to one another. And see how she describes what this is like for the prostitute woman. In prostitution, you are under constant stress, trying to appease the punters, trying to appease their ego. He wants to be the big man boss, and he wants to feel in control. Again, call me a nun, but I think that this is abuse. Psychological abuse at the very least. Sex should make you feel relaxed, not distressed. You should not have to worry that your partner may lose control and hurt you. But again, that's everyday life for women in prostitution.
But of course you get tireder and tireder as the night goes on yourself, so your patience wears thin, and of course you're getting sore and tired and cranky, and all these men.
Feminists fought for the right of women to say no to sex at any time for any reason. But in prostitution, you keep going, even though you're tired, sore from all the unarousing penetration, and sick of the men around you. How is this compatible with enthusiastic consent? Call me whatever you want, but I'm going to say it's not.
And then someone with their great big long fingernail that you didn't expect or they hadn't paid for, and in fact that's really not on anyway.
What's being described here is sexual assault. Doing a sexual thing to another person that they didn't agree to is sexual assault. A punter sticking his finger up your vagina or anus without permission is sexual assault. And just like Kate says, this happens all the time. This happens in legal brothels. This happens in first world countries. Let's call it what it is, assault. This is something, at least in theory, that you're able to take someone to court for. Though as a prostitute woman, you've got a lot of strong barriers preventing you from reporting, even under legalization. If anyone wants to know the details of the reality, you should watch my What is Prostitution and my Sex Worker Safety Tips series. Links in the description.
And so a lot of being a sex worker is in reining in your temper.
Yeah, okay,
Because you can't afford to lose your temper, really, and yet
I don't know
so
how
many
you
annoying
couldn't.
things happen to you all night long.
Yeah.
What does losing control mean in this context? What do you think happens when a punter feels like his masculinity is under threat? What might he do when this happens in front of his male peers? Kate never says it explicitly, but we can all be fairly certain that losing control here does not refer to merely storming out angrily and yelling, "You just lost a customer." And I'd like to add that losing control is a bit of a misnomer. You don't turn violent unless you have the potential for it bubbling under the surface already. Even alcohol can't force a man's hand to strike someone. It can only remove his inhibitions and reveal what he's been prepared to do all along. Losing control here means a punter being prepared to hit, rape, or kill a woman in supposed defense of his manliness. I'm serious when I say this. This is an argument that has been used by killers of prostitute women in court who claimed that they were provoked because the woman made fun of their penis size or lack of virility. Reining in your temper as a prostitute woman is literally a survival mechanism.
So there were lots of things that people would do which were annoying, and of course they'd just try and rip you off, and they'd try and sneak extra services that they're meant to pay for. So outside the normal service, they're meant
What's
to
the
negotiate.
normal service?
The normal service is a massage, oral sex and intercourse.
Okay.
So that's the standard service, and anything beyond that should be negotiated with the lady herself and often paid for.
Prior.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and you agree on the prices and so on, and what's allowed and what's not. It's meant to be very respectful, but guys will always try something anyway.
Yeah. Get away with a little extra.
Yes, and then trying to enforce a way to make them pay in retrospect is really tricky. So.
Oh yeah, it would be.
If you had a partner who always surprised you with doing things you didn't agree to and don't enjoy, if you were my friend, I'd tell you to get as far away from him as possible. Wouldn't you? Speaking specifically about negotiating boundaries before sex. I mean, I think there should always be some negotiating with sex. You should know what your partner's into and what they're not into. Have some understanding of whether there's specific things they dislike or that cause them pain. One night stand or long-term relationship, it's good to put those things out there in the open. But then, sex is also creative, right? It does change while you're doing it. You're deciding a lot of things spontaneously. And the great thing is that with a partner who treats you as their equal and who respects you and your body, you get to reject anything at any time. But you can also introduce something new and fun to do if you're both up for it. There's a level of creativity and spontaneity to it. That's what sex is like when you're meeting on eye level and you trust each other. When it's done for the sake of mutual enjoyment. The sex of prostitution is nothing like that. It's overwhelmingly men buying access to women to do as they please, with such an immense amount of entitlement that what was agreed to isn't even enough, and if he feels like it, he'll just take more at her expense. Paid sex is nothing like sex based on mutual enthusiastic consent. Let's get real about that.
And would you have different prices than the other women that were in the brothel as well?
Yeah, so this is where it gets a bit free market.
Right.
It's very modern because, yes, every woman could set her own prices for the fantasies, extra services.
What this means in practice is that whatever the market demands, the body of the woman pays for. If there's an influx of very poor and or trafficked women, the women in illegal brothels too have to give more for less money. They have to lower their prices, increase the number of men who get access to them per day, and offer practices particularly hazardous to their health. And on a free, unregulated market, every woman is classed, priced, and evaluated according to age, skin color, and body size. There's nothing free about that whatsoever.
So some people would say, I kiss and I don't charge for it. Other people would say, I never kiss. Some people would say, I will kiss you, but I'll charge you $100 for the privilege.
Wow.
Things like anal sex, and sometimes women would charge if men wanted to give them oral sex.
Isn't that interesting? The man has to pay extra to give the prostitute woman oral sex. Talking to other heterosexual women, I'm always hearing that most are desperate to get a man to go down on them, as often enough this is one of the few ways for them to orgasm. But in prostitution, it's not about her pleasure, it's about his performance. If he wants to feel like a great stud for giving her an orgasm, which, let's face it, prostitute women learn to fake fast, the fact that it costs extra shows us that it's something that women endure instead of enjoy. Let's get this really straight. The sexual encounters that are being described in this video, and which again are described in this manner by many, many women in the sex trade, some who consider themselves survivors and some who consider themselves sex workers. None of this has anything to do with egalitarian sexuality. We have a term in our culture for sex that is endured rather than enjoyed. We have a term in our culture for sex that is coerced, though our laws usually only recognize physical force and abandon those coerced emotionally, financially, or like Kate by their addiction. We have a term for men coercing sex out of women in any of these manners. Those words are assault, rape, and rapist. If you think I'm being too harsh, listen to the whole video again and count the times that Kate describes the violation of a boundary.
Right.
It's all, it's really up to you what you want to do and where your boundaries are.
Except, we spent the last 4 minutes hearing about how when you're in prostitution, the men who get access to you have absolutely no respect for your boundaries. Prostitute women aren't in control in the sex trade. Punters are. Yes, prostitute women fake orgasms, deceive and manipulate men to minimize the harm. But really, this is all the dynamics of an abusive relationship, where the abused woman feels that she can control the abuser's outbursts if she just conforms enough to his impossible and cruel expectations, if she puts on a convincing enough show, if she manages to at least kind of uphold one little boundary, some part of her body or her life which he does not have access to. It's an absolute illusion of control. If he wants to hurt her, he will, and the sad truth is that this won't be altered by the way that she conceptualizes her situation.